Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers de pays étrangers.
This is the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast. I am Jesse Martineau. Now, those who know me know I am a really big sports fan, as is Mike Campbell, the producer of this podcast. And the team that I spend the most time watching is definitely the Boston Red Sox. So I certainly have an appreciation for baseball. So, of course, when I learned that one of the best players of all time was a Franco-American from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, I knew he had to have an episode. So I reached out to Anne Conway at the Museum of Working Culture in Woonsocket, and she told me that if I wanted to talk about Napoleon Lajoie, I needed to speak with Dr. Gregory Rubano, the author of the books Untitled Chapter, the story of Napoleon Lajoie, baseball's first superstar, as well as the book Before the Babe, the Emperor. And I am thrilled to say that Greg is our guest this week. Dr. Rubano, welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Call me Greg. It's fine. I'm pleased to just talk to you, Jesse.
You got it, of course. All right, Greg. So before we get going too far in the interview, the very first question I have is, how would you pronounce his last name, Napoleon's last name, and how would he would have pronounced it? Because I'm curious.
This is a very good question. In the research, there were actually 12 different ways to pronounce his name.
Oh man.
In fact, he said once, just pick a vowel and you'll be close enough.
Oh wow. Okay.
And as you can imagine, when you're in Woonsocket with a strong native French population, I've always been nervous because they want me to say Lajoie,
Sure.
But some of the possibilities, Lajoie, 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 like 3 syllables.
Okay.
Laju. And the funny part is, I have the answer though.
Okay.
Because in doing research in the Hall of Fame, I came across a letter from his niece. Now, his niece and her husband took in Napoleon in the last 4 years of his life in Daytona Beach in Florida. And because his wife had died and he needed to be looked after to some degree. And the Hall of Fame actually asked, how do you pronounce his name? And he said, my uncle and I always pronounced it Lajoie. Now, you can imagine there was a little silence from the French community.
I would imagine, sure.
I said Lajoie. But I figured that's the latest and the last. But you may find me slipping into any other pronunciations because the guy was so cool.
I might do the same. Well, I'm going to feel good knowing that it's going to be hard for me to completely mispronounce it, seeing as I have so many options to go with.
You can't.
That works. All right, perfect. All right, real quick, I just would like to get your story. Kind of where are you from, and how do you become a baseball historian? This is such an amazing job.
I always was a member of SABR, Society of American Baseball Research, and to kind of take your question to like, how in the hell did you get interested in, joy?
Sure.
I think the reason is I was reading one of their books, and the man who was the chairperson, and I'll quote it in a second, but the chairperson of the dead ball era, which is the era that Lajoie comes from, and he started out a conference meeting, and he says, "Who the hell was that guy anyway?"
Oh, wow.
It was like the very ground on which I thought I knew everything I needed to know, about baseball history, opened up beneath my feet. I discovered there was much more to Lajoie than his 3,242 hits, his 339 batting average, his almost 1,600 RBIs. There was his 1901 Triple Crown, his 4 consecutive batting titles, his 4 slugging percentage crowns. He actually batted over 350 10 times. While my mind struggled to picture a second baseman capable of inflicting that kind of damage with his bat, I grappled with another question. How come I had never really heard of him.
Right.
Where was the full-length biography of him or the motion picture about his life? Who was this guy, seemingly named after an early 19th century European emperor who had eluded my notice for so many years? And this is coming from the chairperson, so it was like, that's a really good question. How could the ball be dropped on this guy? Excuse the pun. Yeah. There'll be a lot of stupid puns from me, so don't worry.
All the better.
So that got me interested, and I went to the Woonsocket mayor and started talking about that, and she said, yeah, well, we know about him. And I said, well, there are no streets named after him. There's no statues after him. And then she kind of grew quiet. And I said, well, I want to write a few books about him. And I would like to focus especially on the Woonsocket population.
Napoleon Lajoie, he mentioned he was born in Woonsocket. What do we know kind of about his parents and his upbringing when he was a kid?
Yeah, that's a good question. His family came from Quebec, outside of Montreal, like in a small village 20 miles south of Montreal. But as was the case for many, economics were not good. Family was struggling. So they finally decided, and especially since the mills in Rhode Island offered like 2 or 3 times the price, the salary, so to speak,
Sure.
Of those in French Canadian. So they came down, they stopped in Vermont, tried farming, it didn't work. So they finally then arrived in Woonsocket. Now there already had been 5 Lajoies in the family, carrying. And one guy kind of laughs at that. Typical French Canadian family.
That's small for a French Canadian family. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Just he said, except that normally they have 12 kids and they give that one to the church.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And I didn't know. I was just going, okay, he said it. So the family came down, but here's where the things went berserk. After Lajoie is born in Woonsocket, okay, but by time he's 8 years old, his father has died. His father died when he was 8. So now you had a family of 8 struggling, trying to make ends meet with hardly any money. And I looked in the town bureau records, and the family actually had 9 different listings of places that he lived.
Oh, wow.
In 2 or 3 years. So what was happening. The family was saying, we'll take him for a little while. We don't have a whole lot of money. Then he'll go to his uncle. Then he can go to his sister. That's how the whole thing moved. And then the love affair with Woonsocket developed, which we can talk about whenever you want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll certainly get to that for sure. So definitely a tough upbringing. I did see, though, maybe you could talk a bit about it. We talk a lot about the mills and obviously the mill culture and the Franco-Americans.
Yeah.
Now he did it sometime in the mills, right?
Yeah, he was in the mills. He was a card sweeper in the cotton mills. One story, and believe me, Jess, it's hard. I can see even the things that he says. There are times that if you really did it historically, looked at every little thing, you'd say, I don't know, that really might not have been. I mean, that was another year. And maybe we all kind of create histories that we don't know about or that we need to believe in. But he said that he once almost lost his arm in one of them and the curling machines that came in as he was pulling out the threads. That's the only report I'd have of that. And obviously it wouldn't be coming from anybody else because they're not going to report that in the mills and factories.
Yeah.
But he had other jobs too. By 10 he was in love with baseball. Gotcha. By 11 he was so good that if the other team had 9, they just counted him as having 7. When you have him, then you're only going to have seven people on your team. Okay.
Oh, that's kind of crazy.
His mother was frightened to death that something was going to happen to him, obviously, because it was a dangerous place. Get run over easily by, a cab, in that case, a horse-drawn cab. And she said, I'm not going to allow you to play. So his friends and he said, well, okay, we'll do this. We will call you Sandy. Now, obviously, he didn't have light complexion and sandy hair. So the mother would thought, oh, fine, that Sandy is playing a lot of ball, but that's not my son. So he had a little bit of chicanery in him, and you got to like that. Love of the game,
That is super. Yeah, it is kind of a crazy story. I had when I saw that he worked in the carding room. I actually got a hold of my mom. My mom worked in a mill, and she told me about how that was kind of like cleaning the cotton before it got sent to the spinning or turned it into yarn. So super interesting.
Yeah, and I think every member of the family at one time or another was in the mill. They moved on to the fire department, to labor union jobs, but started there,
Gotcha. Okay, so he starts playing baseball locally. He's getting the attention of the people in town. They know he's really good. When does it start to occur to him he might be able to do this for a living?
That's a good question. I think he was he was very aware of the social drama of not being in the same class as some of the other ball players and those who made more money than he did, So he was very class conscious. And at one point, he got a job because the town teams, they could get a ringer on their team. You could pay to get one player come in from another town to play for you, even though he was not a resident of your town.
Interesting.
Okay? Now, the funny part is Mr. Burns. Mr. Burns remembered that because Mr. Burns wanted Napoleon Lajoie on his baseball team as a ringer.
That's awesome.
and they told him he died 50 years ago, Mr. Burns.
That's awesome.
So what happened is, he got on, and then people started to see how really good he was, and he started to realize that he could prove to these people that this was one way of showing. I can stand erect on this field, bring who you want on, go ahead, I'm ready, And so it was kind of that ethnic, cultural, class pride that I think got him going, okay? Even though he's a very humble man, I have a lot of stories about humility. You have to have that kind of belief in self and a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, to make it. And he had it, in that way.
Gotcha. Did they speak French in the house growing up then? Was that his first language?
Yeah, they did. I mean, because there was a town bureau, and it said that at the age of 8, he could read but not write English. Gotcha. So I'm kind of assuming it was, straight line French in the upbringing.
Sure.
It wouldn't have been a problem where he was working. It wasn't like he had to learn it, in that kind of way. But he did.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Now, what did he look like physically? Was he a physically imposing guy? He's just built super athletic, different than his peers?
I'm wearing a T-shirt that has his picture on it, but unfortunately, you can't see it.
I can see pictures, sure.
Okay. When I look at his picture, he looks like Robert De Niro, I think. A young Robert De Niro, but much bulkier. And by bulky, I don't mean no blubber. He was 6'1", 185 pounds, rock strong. Yeah. So much so that he was offered jobs to be like the strong man in the circus and all these other places. And his wife quickly said to him, "No, you're not taking those kind of jobs." So he was a physical specimen, in a lot of ways. He was also very good looking. There are a lot of stories about women sending him photos, hoping that, that he might autograph them, or can I have a picture of you? And of course, his wife also said, "No, you're not doing that."
Makes sense.
But there's a story I can tell you about that, because this is how humble he was, because of his French connection. Of course, he was known as the Emperor of the Diamond, the D'Artagnan of the baseball field, or that kind of stuff. So it got really a lot, almost too much. So there was in one interview with a journalist, he said he read part of a paper article based on his looks. And it says, "Okay, I played with the majesty becoming my name." And he's still reading. "And as you watch this big, grim, fascinating Frenchman, solemn and serious to the point of sadness, you think to yourself, there could never be a name that would befit him so well as his own, Napoleon Lajoie. He plays just like his name sounds. Every movement harmonizes with the deep, stately poetry of his name. At that point, Lajoie puts the paper down, says, if my father could read this, oh me, oh my. And then he goes on, he says, listen to this one. I'm an eye-filling D'Artagnan whose every pose is a picture. A handsome fellow, big and dark with bold features. I wear my cap cocked on the side of my head, covered in thick, dark, wavy hair. And the big Frenchman wears the uniform roll collar of the day, casually turned up to make an attractive frame for his face. And oh, that face. Long, clean-cut mouth, big, finely chiseled nose. This is all coming from what he's reading.
I love
with
it.
a dimple on his chin, a pair of soft brown eyes that seem to look right into you, and yet are soft, tender, and gentle. So at that point, he couldn't remain serious. So he laughs and he goes, soft and tender and gentle? Aren't I the original come on? How do I keep my marriage together after my wife reads this one? So, so yeah, he was considered quite the good-looking fellow. You know, Ty Cobb was as ugly as a chicken, but not this guy.
That's awesome. I mean, just looking at the picture now, he doesn't seem very soft and gentle to me. He looks like somebody I would not want to make angry down in dark alley for sure.
Oh yeah, you didn't fool with him, you know. And some of his great movements, even like his movement from one league or one team to another, was because somebody was pushing into his face. You know, physically, he would never hit anybody, but physically and emotionally, you don't do that to me. You know, my space, your space. And if you're trying to cheat me, you're going to suffer. I'll always give you my best shot, you know.
Okay,
Now,
so
I have a couple questions for you, Jess. You ready?
oh, please go for it.
Okay. Now, if you get these wrong, then I understand. I'll be nice.
No negative consequence. Okay.
Okay. These are who questions. Okay.
Oh, all right. That's going to make it tough. Sure.
All right. Who had the highest average, or who still has the highest average in the history of Major League Baseball?
Well, that one's a layup. So that would be our boy. Was it 426?
Yep.
Napoleon? Lajoie?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great, because Ty Cobb hated him for many years because Ty's highest was 412, and he beat him out by 14 points. But you know, in that year, that was in 1901, and that was the year that Connie Mack, you might have heard of Connie Mack. You know, you're a baseball player,
Yeah,
right?
certainly.
You know about baseball.
Yeah,
So,
pretty good manager. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Connie brought him in to play for his team. So his first team was not the Cleveland team, but it was Philadelphia. Now, in that one year, they were starting up the American League. That's why Connie wanted him. I got to get this superstar from the National League. So 1901 is when the American League starts. He led the league 426. That's hitting, yeah, in runs, in doubles, in RBIs, slugging percentage, total hits, even in fielding average. He led the league. So it was like a total wipe across the board. And so, of course, Connie was just ecstatic. You know, they had gotten the superstar of superstars. And whenever I talk to my Boston Red Sox friends, I'd say, oh, I don't know who he is. I say, well, you know, Boston might not even be in existence if it wasn't for Nap, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to get to that, kind of what he meant, not just to that franchise, but kind of to this semi-upstart American League is kind of what it sounds like. And there's this kind of career before that, short one with the Phillies.
Right.
So how did that come about?
Well, that came through and again, it depends on how you hear the whole story and such, you know.
Sure.
But it comes out that, you know, somebody made reference, a pitcher from Brown University made reference to having played against this hayseed in Woonsocket. And he said, but, you know, every time I pitch the ball is out, the line drives everywhere. This is a serious guy. So that began the farm, you know, the scouts running about, and he finally was offered a job first with Fall River. So the Fall River Indians was the first team that he came onto, and he batted 429 for them. Okay.
Not a bad start, yeah.
Oh yeah. And so in terms of being loved, they went crazy over him too, as you can imagine. And they had a dinner for him once, and it got me a little bit because the mayor says the most important thing of what he has done is that he has become the symbol for our kids in this city that they can make it. So he was very much an Horatio Alger figure, for everybody. But he said, it hasn't helped their history though. He said, I've been told that there's a history teacher who told me when he asked the question, what was Napoleon's greatest achievement? The answer came back, 14 total bases. Because they didn't know Napoleon the emperor, they only knew Napoleon the player.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And he was so powerful that one of the reporters said, not since the slaughter done by Lizzie Borden has there been so much bloodshed on a Puritan soil.
That's pretty good. That's a good cut from that reporter.
So he became and then of course, once you have that, you're going to have professional teams all around you, trying to get you, and that's when the Phillies popped on in.
Gotcha.
Now I got another question for you. This one's easy.
Okay. Well, I thought the first one was pretty good.
1 for 1. Okay. I got a feeling you're going to be 3 for 3 when this is all done.
I at least got to get to 426. Yeah.
You told me. You said I love this guy, Knapp. I know everything about him, and I said he's one of mine. Okay. Now, who got more Hall of Fame votes than Cy Young?
Interest speaker, from what I understand. Yeah.
Interest speaker. You see, I'm loving it. You not only got the question right, but you got the bonus question right.
You got the bonus. It's always good to have bonus points. Yeah.
Now, this one who had a Major League Baseball team named after him.
The Naps. Yes.
The Naps. One thing I found fascinating about that was that, because now we're into the Cleveland love affair. We got the love affair from Fall River. Then we get to Cleveland. The Cleveland love affair, it was really so strong, but how do I put it? So strong that at first, when the team just said, why don't you, give us a name you want the team to be called? They've been called the Broncos. They had all kinds of other names. And they voted for Knapp after, of course, Napoleon, their player manager. Now, 4 years later, when the team thought, well, maybe it's time to move on because he's no longer the manager, because he found managing, and he never won a pennant,
Sure.
So except in the International League of Toronto. But so he ended up saying, well, I don't know. And the fans said, yeah, we do know. We're still keeping the name Knapp. Okay. And when later on they asked him what was the most fulfilling and wonderful moment of your life, it wasn't anything to do with his baseball performance. It was to do with getting that he got a horseshoe. I think, and you're nodding, maybe you got it, but there was a huge horseshoe that he walked through after celebrate 10 years with the Naps. Awesome. And it was 1,009 silver dollars. And the silver dollars, at least 80% of them were donated by the fans. And as Lajoie said, and $1 in that day was a lot. So sure. he was very thankful for that and very humble in response, always was.
Interesting. No, that's cool. No,
so you got them all right. I can't even think of.
I'm on fire so far.
But, I think you know those too. So
well, if they're coming, I'm feeling good about myself now. I get building some confidence. One thing I did see, which I was not aware of at all, before we kind of doing some research, was that coming up through like his minor league days, he was mostly a center fielder. And so, how does he end up playing second base?
Well, that's kind of a good question, because the migration to second was a wonderful thing for him, but he actually, he was a catcher in the very early days. And you can imagine he had the bulk,
Oh yeah, big dude, right? Yeah.
He had the arm. I think it was just simply a managerial decision. And since he could play so well, almost at any position, I do say though, he wasn't fleet of foot. You never see him as leading the league in stolen bases,
sure,
or those kind of things. But he was very, very quick off the ball. If you were to see him, you wouldn't believe it. If a ground ball was coming to him, he didn't do what they do now, come with the glove forward, make sure the knees are close, watch the ball into your glove, stand up and throw the ball. He would basically go down to the ball and the ball would land in his glove and he would release the ball before he'd even looked at first base. So they said it was like so quick and so fast, and later on they would ask him, and he was a Bill Belichick in some ways. I'll kind of explain why.
Okay.
Because they asked him, like, how do you explain why you're such a good fielder? And he goes, I got big feet. And he wasn't going to go into any details. In other words, I got the ball fast because I have big feet. A nonsense answer, like Belichick would give,
Yeah.
And then,
absolutely.
what's your idea of an ideal baseball player? Come to the field and watch the game. Okay. And he didn't mean himself, but don't tell me what your ideal is. I'm not giving you my ideal is. Just watch me play. If you think I'm good, fine, And then, what does it make to be a great hitter? What do you have to do? And he goes, hit the ball.
Yeah. Okay.
And he kept on with these answers. And he would even start interviews saying, you got 5 minutes to finish the interview. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Four of which will be my voice talking. Okay. And they said, okay. And then when it came to like, the next step, he would just kind of say, I really don't want to be around you guys. I really don't. I'm not comfortable with all this stuff.
Wow.
That was a day and age when everybody, you would never say that about Ty Cobb, more people around to ask more questions, all the superstars.
Sure.
He never wanted that stuff. He never wanted to be, he said, okay, I'll give you information about me. What do you want to know? And the interviewer says, tell me about your life. And he goes, I'm not telling you anything about my life. So he invites the question and then shuts off the answer.
Yeah, sure.
But I will tell you, my chicken lays 16 eggs a day.
Oh, geez.
My horse weighs X number of kilos. He said, my wife is in yarn. She makes me 5 socks every 2 weeks. Inconsequential, nothing stuff like,
right.
What are you going to do with that? He actually moved away from Cleveland and he lived in a farm 20 miles away, and just to basically exhale, to be with himself and his wife. He never had any children, so he kind of settled down into that world of the farm, had a pet dog, a couple of pet horses, Holly and Molly and all these kind of things. And he said, though, but sometimes he said he didn't say paparazzi, but he said, everybody followed me everywhere and I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
He said that the train would stop and say, there is the house of Napoleon Lajoie. Okay. And he said, it got so bad that, here's his humor, that the chickens started to say, I'm not laying any eggs unless I get some of the money from these photos and these sports interviews. So he never took himself that seriously in that way.
Sure.
And he explained it. He said, if I had a son, why would I want to give him a swelled head? He said, I was an accident. He said, I was born with, I'm the poor sucker, not so poor, but the sucker who could play ball. That's all, don't make so much out of all this, So that's why I loved him too. Like, how can I keep on writing about him or talking about him with the kids? Because it's all that humility and that pride and that sense of perspective that he had, But he took everything seriously. If someone gave him an award, his answers would be brief, but they'd be very sincere. You could tell. It was not Belichick. When the citizens were talking to him, he was a different person. They called him Nap or Polly. They had all kinds of names for him, and he would always be asking about, so what's going on in Woonsocket when anybody visited, and that was kind of fun too. He never lost his love for the city. And then I'll let you ask the question because I gave you
this is great.
a 4-hour answer to this.
I like it.
I was doing a presentation in the Museum of Work and Culture because I wanted to test just how much does Woonsocket want to have this hero come back, and that's it. And over the course of time, the mayor wanted, the superintendent of education, the tourist chamber, the Little League, they all wanted to hear more, and they joined this task force to help tell his life. But I'm doing a presentation at the end. This man comes up, and he's about 80, okay? And he's got a baseball in his hand. And he said, this is a signed baseball by Napoleon. Lajoie.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I was thinking, oh gosh, I don't know, I don't want to, I mean, because I knew the signatures and it looked like it, but there's so many forgeries
Of
everywhere
course.
now. Yeah.
Of course.
And I knew that it was $29,000 for that signature.
Yeah.
Now, if my wife would let me, I would buy the $29,000 ball.
Yeah.
But then I'd have to get another wife.
Sure. No, I get
But
it.
he came up, and this was the great part, Jess. He said, well, he signed it for me when I went to visit him. And I said, when did you visit him? And he said, in Daytona. Now I said, I'm checking that off. Yeah, I know he spent time in Daytona.
Sure.
And he said, I was, and this is a typical great story that the guy was getting ready, he's going to get married, and he was in a furniture store in downtown Woonsocket, speaking the French back and forth, and somebody said to him, so where are you going to go on your honeymoon? He said, I don't know where to go. And out of the blue, the guy who owns the store says, go down and see Nap. And he said, I'll go see Nap. He said, oh yeah. He said, the guy arranges it. And so for his honeymoon, he goes down to see Napoleon. And Napoleon greets him at the door, and he shows me a picture. The guy had a picture,
That's unbelievable.
of Napoleon, 82-year-old gracious man signing this thing, and invites him over for dinner the next day. Didn't ask his wife, so I said to the guy, I said, can I use your name? And he said, no. I said, why? He said, well, my wife and I, we've changed a lot since those days. And he showed me, and again, I looked at the picture. He was a handsome guy. His wife was beautiful. And he said, I don't want people seeing us the way we are now. He said, keep me out of this. He said, but I'll let you use the story, So there's humility and sincerity on all sides. And you come away saying, another reason why you got to tell this guy's story,
That's awesome. I'm going to be a best man coming up this year, and I cannot send my friend to go hang out with one of the best ball players ever. So that works out.
Sorry about that.
Nuts. Yeah, that's
well,
nuts.
If was still alive, and you seem to know a lot about him. He would put posthumous meeting.
Yeah, be interesting to.
But it's funny because he was so humble. The Little League wanted to he was one of the executive ministers of Little League, and they wanted to honor him. He said no, so he would sit in center field, watch them play, and support them, but never wanted to be called forth, to the microphone. Wouldn't do it. That's. He did see Ty Cobb once before he died. Ty Cobb came to visit him in 4 years before each of them died in his Daytona Beach house. And don't you wish you could have heard the conversation?
Yeah, for real.
There's this series called Glory of Our Times where the guy took his microphones and he recorded the old stars. But unfortunately, he was doing it in the 60s. Lajoie and Cobb are both gone. But to have them both would have been a great story.
Yeah. Is there any video? I couldn't find video of him on the internet. Does video exist?
There is, and I can send you something if you want.
Absolutely.
I think it's it might be early 50s. And for a while there, the American League was doing inspirational instructional videos.
Okay.
And they would have great stars of the teams come. And for some reason, they decided to have Lajoie come. Now, the guy is 64 years old, at the time.
Sure.
And you wouldn't have believed how sweet a swing it was. I mean, even then, because they would always talk then, like he's got a nonchalance that makes it look like he really even doesn't care, what he's doing. But you watch it, Jess, and, you can't see me. I'm trying to visualize it. Yeah. And he's coming through and just like a good bat speed, and then eye on the ball, and then just with a flick of the wrist. Now, this is a guy who hit massive line drives. He was noted for inflicting pain with his line drives. So much so that there was an umpire telling a story that he said he was trying to help this rookie pitcher, third baseman. And he said, one reason why you might not be starting is you got to move up closer. These guys are bunting, and you're not getting to the bunts. So yeah, bunting nowadays. So that no way.
It doesn't happen. Yeah.
So the guy moved forward, and Lajoie hits a wicked line drive off the guy's shin. And so next time the umpire sees him, the guy's on crutches. And then I started doing more research about his power, and there was a fielder named Kid Eberfield he wasn't Hall of Fame, but a very good player. And he said, I played third base. See, now the ump didn't know Lajoie was going to be batting, so he told him, he didn't know that you're going to face this behemoth,
Sure.
But the guy Kid Eberfield did know, and he played a step back, and Lajoie hit a line drive to him, and basically it lifted him off his feet. And I was reading the story, it was fascinating. And he said, I landed 5 feet beyond where I caught the ball. All I felt was a real stinging. And then he said, and I looked, and thank God the ball was still in my hands. And he said, there was nobody who hit the ball that hard. And so many say, yeah, Babe Ruth might have hit the majestic home runs. Ty Cobb might have found the gaps, or bunted. Said nobody hit it this hard. And then I saw an article, and it was a Saber approved article. But it was an article way back in 1910 talking about how Lajoie hit the ball so hard that the guts spilled out. It unwound, as he hit it. And I said, this really can't be. But I found the article that confirmed that he did it. And the guy in the article is saying, we're not talking any run-of-the-mill nothing ball. We're talking a professional ball, and that's the way it was. You can be a little bit, even I can sometimes question things, though.
Of course.
The dead ball was so dead, and there's a great story where Lajoie he's playing against Detroit, and he's the manager of the Naps course. And he says to the umpire, a guy named Connolly, he said, you got to throw this piece of mass squash and tomato out of the game. Look, there's nothing left to this ball. So the ump says, what do you think? We're made of money? Now just turn around and get back to the dugout. That ball stays. So Lajoie turns to him and says, you big Mick, you didn't even know how to spell the word ball when you first came. So then comes the counter insult against the French. So the umpire says, well, you big frog, when I first saw you, you had a cardboard carrying case, and that was it. So at this point, Lajoie decides he's going to do what he wants to do. So he kicks the umpire in the shins, which is nothing. In those days, the umps were abused so much it didn't even mean anything. But he kicks him. The umpire drops the ball. Lajoie grabs the ball and throws it out of the stadium. And then the ump says, you're out of the game. And Lajoie says, so's the ball. So, so he had a sense of humor. He could get his way in that kind of way.
Yeah, sounds like a bit
of stories, a lot of good stories.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it did sound like he did have a bit of a temper. He got suspended a couple times, right? For different interactions with umpires.
Yeah. And one time he got in trouble, but he didn't even mean it. He was the manager, and the game was at Fall River. The game was over, like it was 10-1 with an inning or two to go, and he came up to the umpire, and they agreed that okay, it's 11-1 game. You can call any kind of strikes you want now and get this game over, But sure. He never told the rest of the players in the team. So one big guy who was one of the sluggers on the team is called out on 3 pitches that are way outside. And the guy drops his bat, goes after the umpire, beats the living daylights out of him, stripping him down to his underwear. They have to pull people away from him. And then the ump goes to the clubhouse, and he's followed by the player. And the player burns his clothing and does this demonic little dance all around him as he's burning it, and all because Lajoie, and of course the umpire retired the next day, all because Lajoie never told the players, I made this deal, it's okay. So, he could cause trouble without even knowing it.
Yeah, that's pretty nutty. Yeah, so was there the one story where he got tossed from a game but refused to leave the bench, and they had to call the police or something? You scored him.
Really? I don't know about that. Maybe add me on that one. I'll get that info for me. That was kind of good.
Sure, I think I got that from a Saber article.
I know he got in fights with even his own teammates, like George Stovall was one of his players, chairs over the head. But he would just he's just a good old guy. He just wants to play. I understand that. So there was this sense of, I'm not a prima donna, neither is he. that's okay, and stuff.
Now, I did read from one place that claims that in 1899, he literally hit the cover off the ball 3 separate occasions. That might be one of those, not really sure if I believe it situations, right?
I found 2 examples of that.
Did you really?
Yeah. And one was confirmed. In other words, by a saber accompanying story, Then I know there were times he hit the ball so hard, like once he hit the ball so hard, it got caught in the fence and they couldn't get it out from the fence. So he ended up an inside the park home run, which was the guy with his speed. You're not going to see much of that, that kind of stuff. That's the power we're talking about. I mean, it's hard to believe that he was called the Babe Ruth of his time, but that's kind of a misnomer because, he didn't hit the majestic, go watch that shot,
Sure.
Going far. He was one reporter, a guy named Arthur Daly, used to write for the New York Times. He referred to him as having rugged grace. And the only other person he saw was like that was DiMaggio. And DiMaggio, remember, had that nice sweet swing as well. Okay.
Yeah.
And was noted for gracefully in the outfield, just like
Absolutely
was for the infield here. And I think that hurt him in the long run because baseball was looking for hellraisers, looking for, I can do it, get out of my way. They love the Ty Cobb story.
The Ty Cobb, yeah, that's who you're describing right there.
Yeah. And there were other players too, even Shoeless Joe Jackson, the daring do of Shoeless Joe, all this kind of stuff. And then you had Lajoie, graceful, even on his Hall of Fame plaque, the most effective and graceful second baseman. And they always would call him that, so graceful. He was the Fred Astaire of second baseman, these kind of things. And I think what eventually happened is people misunderstood that he either didn't put great effort in it or he didn't have the real passion that you needed to drive a baseball player. But if you watch the way he prepared for games, he'd be there early on. He'd be bleeding sometimes, just like sliding into the bases, trying to practice his slide into second base, and would be the last one to leave, a Tom Brady kind of thing, but the last one to leave after the game was over, still running and doing his thing. So he took the game very seriously because he knew he could be out at any moment. He said, "I don't perform, I'm gone," and that's what they did in those days. That's why the rookie would never give him much support. You're taking my job, or rookie, and that was it.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about kind of how he ended up with the A's, because that entire story is incredibly fast. I actually had listened to an entire podcast episode, over a half hour, just dealing with this situation, the lawsuit that ensued from this situation. So yeah, I'm an attorney, so I found it super fascinating. But maybe you can just kind of explain, first of all, what kind of contracts looked like generally at the time, and how this was such a momentous, huge deal that he made this transition.
I think one reason why he left is because he was a man of his word. He expected that would be the same. So I think it was Colonel Rogers, who was the owner of the Philadelphia National League team, by union rules then, the most you could make was $2,000, or by agreement, that they, the team owners, put in place.
Right.
Was $2,400, and that was it. Lajoie found out that one of the players that was on the team was getting more money than he was. The guy denied it. Roger said, no, blah, blah, blah. But he knew because he basically had talked and done his research.
Sure.
And so already, because he had lied to him, it was, okay, you're in trouble. I have no loyalty to you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it ended up that then Connie Mack, and it depends on who, what story you hear, but supposedly he offered him like 2 years at $24,000, So the whole amount was just escalating way off what Rogers was going to offer in the long run. But Rogers was going to go high legal, and say, you're not allowed to do this. And it dragged out. And as you probably read in the podcast, I probably mentioned how he wasn't allowed to play because he was in Philadelphia, because he was afraid the police were going to grab him because he had broken some injunction, some legal thing, which is constantly changing which side You know, the lawyers interpreted who won and who won the case, who lost it. So he would like get off the train, you know, before he came into Philly, you know, and then and then the police would board the train and they'd say, "Where is he? We know he's here," you know, and all the players would just smile, and of course the great cover-ups, like, what did this guy look like again? You know, he played for our team, you know. So they were always zinging the authorities along the way, and thus came the great, you know, migration.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously there's no free agency. You're not just free to up and leave when you want.
Yeah, right. Kurt Flood now having come, you know, yeah. So,
right. So yeah.
And you do wonder, you don't hear much about that, do you, Jessica? You don't hear much about his role in defying the owners and bringing in free agency. It's very rare that when they review, you know, they'll maybe have a paragraph or two, but you know, when his obituary came, that should have been one, and there wasn't much in it. You know, the obituaries were statistics, his nickname, his popularity, etc., but not his real impact on the game, you know, in that kind of way. And I don't know why. I'm really not sure. Maybe they think, you know, there are more pointed issues going on now, you know, in the public media. I'm not sure. No guess on that one, you know.
Yeah, no, hugely significant. Absolutely. The story of Lajoie and not being allowed in the state of Pennsylvania, and the lawsuits going back and forth as one court rules in his favor and another overturns it and goes up to the state Supreme Court, and it ends up with him hanging out in Atlantic City during when the team was playing in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it sounds like the legal concerns name about the last election. You know, people.
No, that is pretty well. Yeah, that whole situation is kind of crazy. But it did lead to, I know something we alluded to earlier, but I think we probably should touch more on the impact that he had, I mean, on the American League. Yeah. At the time, he was the biggest name in the sport. The fact that he's in the American League, hugely significant for the eventual success.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There was an article by Comiskey, who was the owner of the Chicago team, you know, back then. And he said, basically, no one outdrew Lajoie. Not Cobb, none of the superstars. You can mention them. When we had him, things were crazy. Wow. And I think it also did this, because he was so beloved regionally, you know, Fall River loved him, Woonsocket loved him. You can name a million little towns and hamlets that were around those cities. He was their idol. One writer said that Woonsocket loses its mental balance once a year, and that's when Napoleon comes to visit. And he said that he contended the factories close down, the fire engines come out, the parades come, they're blowing the whistles, total celebration. That's how much he was beloved. And then when he came, and then when he barnstormed, you know, and came and visited and had his teams come, it's a long way of saying there were hotbeds of really devout, rabid fans that loved him throughout all of New England. So that meant if it was time to go see him play in the major leagues, they were going to be there. That was their Napoleon, you know, and they went running off. He was playing in Boston, we're going, you know. They would travel long. They already were like pretty good traveling fans, if you can be at that stage.
Yeah, I was going to say, right.
You know, it's not quite. He carried a canvas sneakers that he first wore with New Bedford every day of his life to all whenever he traveled. A reminder of his roots. So
that's awesome.
And the people knew that. So they knew that this wasn't just a guy who played for whatever team, but played for us. And in Woonsocket, one time the Toastmaster gave him a watch, you know, beautiful engraved watch. And he prefaced it by saying, let this watch mean to you that this is your home. And wherever you play, whatever city's name adores your breast, we always want to know that Woonsocket is in your heart. And then he got and the Hall of Fame still has this. There was an ebony cane that was inscribed to him. And I had so much fun because they let me look at it, you know.
That's awesome.
And I looked at it, and it was gorgeous, and gold head on the top, and was given by Woonsocket again to their star. But I remember that when he received it, because it was part of a celebration they were having in downtown Woonsocket, where they had a huge dinner for him. They had Lajoie salad. They had all these puns and all these things, and people loved him. And he just said, "I'm not so good at giving speeches. I wish I were, because I could strongly express my appreciation and the kindness. I pledge I will always conduct myself in a way that you will never be disappointed in me." And when he said that, I mean, I'm just trying to make the point that there were so many ties, both by heritage, by Horatio Alger ties, and by the moral character of the man, that there were enough hotbeds. And I think that just generated into, this is a superstar in so many ways. And thank God the American League got him, because I don't know, particularly whether they had that many others on the way,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so one place. I mean, whether he was playing or not could be the difference of tens of thousands of people in attendance.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which seems absolutely crazy for one player. But
and there are all kinds of stories that people still have in Woonsocket about the guy who used to be the director of the Museum of Working Culture. He had stories about when Lajoie came to Woonsocket, and I could never find any proof of these, but doesn't mean they didn't exist. They're embedded in the oral history of the area,
Sure.
And he said he came once, and the fans were everywhere, and he supposedly hit this massive drive that broke X number of windows in the school nearby, and he was apologetic for what he did and such. But again, it was people saying, we want to keep those memories, even if they are kind of apocryphal. I never could really confirm that. And there's an older population in Woonsocket that's still very rabid in baseball, and they should be. I mean, when you think about it, you got Gabby Harnett in the Hall of Fame. You got obviously Lajoie. You've got Rocco Bardelli, coach, manager in Minnesota. You got Clem Labine, all-star reliever, for the Dodgers, all coming from Woonsocket. I mean,
I did not know that.
No. And I was trying to think, and I asked the Hall of Fame, because the Hall of Fame actually we're going to have, it got canceled because of COVID. We were going to have a celebration salute to him.
Oh, wow.
In Woonsocket baseball. And I will definitely invite you, because it's going to come. But I
would love to be there. I'm sure Mike would love to be there too.
Oh yeah,
baseball fan.
No doubt. I'll send you the news when it comes. I mean, we were right there. It was going to be held in September. The bus company helped us. We wanted to bring the little leaguers there, so they could see all the information about them and such. And it broke down. But we're back in, I won't say negotiations. They said yes, but as you can imagine, they got a makeup agenda, trying to all the things they missed.
Of course, yeah.
They could do it, but wouldn't that be great? And then
that would be amazing.
Then the Red Sox, Gordon Eads, remember the historian of the Red Sox?
He was great, absolutely great baseball writer too.
Yeah, I love him. But I was doing a brief presentation. He came over and he said, "This is the kind of story that we should be promoting. The kids, the love of the game as it's not held anymore." And so we had Napoleon Lajoie night or day at Fenway. I would have invited you, Chin, but I didn't know you then. Sorry.
I'll come to the next one.
Yeah, good. And it was so cute, just because the mayor got us all T-shirts, and we got a bus of 100 people to go down to Fenway, which is pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
Including little leaguers, because it was during a school day. This kind of stuff. But so it's an ongoing love thing. We got a statue maybe coming. Again, I have it in front of me. It's like 8, maybe like 10 feet. It's going to be eventually 7 feet tall. No,
oh wow,
it's going to be 6'1", his same height.
Oh, there you go, life size. There you go.
But I got the what they call them, prototype. It's a better word than that of it. And so there's been discussion about, can we get some fundraising to put this up? Because we had the Little League field named after him, which was nice to get it done. The Little Leaguers, at least they were a couple years ago, wearing N on their hats for naps, in the Woonsocket thing. And the idea was, wouldn't the statue bring it all together? So we got to find some way to, it's not cheap, because it's going to be,
of course,
we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, but again, to have the kids come and see that figure, and then to have, educational programming all around it, because we educated up to 2,500 Woonsocket fifth graders before the COVID hit. So there were, 5 years of kids going through these programs at the museum. And so
That's amazing.
when I was walking, they would call me Nap, and I kind of. They also couldn't figure out how I could still be alive because I was pretending to be Nap. You said you were born in 1875. You must be really old.
Pretty old, yeah.
There's a very famous Rhode Island sculptor who did the statue of Ted Williams. That's in there. Remember that beautiful wooden carved statue of Ted Williams? And the guy's name is Alain Lamontagne, and he's a wonderful craftsman. He was
Good French name too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. And I said to him, you've done him, you've done Babe Ruth. Everybody loves the stuff you do. Can't you do this guy? And he thought it over, and then for reasons I won't go public with, decided no. But if he had said yes, Hall of Fame was all in. So we would have had Napoleon's statue as you walked into the Hall of Fame.
Oh wow!
Everybody in the world about baseball and Napoleon.
Wow.
So I kind of live saying, for every success, there's a failure, but we're going to do it. It's,
yeah. I will say, which is really neat, the dedication of that Little League field, that's on YouTube. So we can.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Don't I look just like Lajoie, just like Robert De Niro on my uniform?
I can see where the students were confused. Absolutely. Well, where did you get, first of all, you got the cool outfit, you got the jersey, you got the mitts, you got bats. How'd you put all the getup together?
As my wife, who's just smiling probably in the other room, saying, because you're a fanatic who over 40 years has been collecting anything that seems really interesting, I would start collecting the bats and the gloves. Okay. I get frustrated because you'll see there has never been found a Napoleon Lajoie inscribed glove. Doesn't exist. Wow. Okay. Even though in the ads of the sports companies, Spalding and stuff, you'll see it, but it's never been found. And once I came across a bat. This is interesting. It was in a cotton mill in Woonsocket, and the guy was auctioning it off. Wanted pretty good money, which I wasn't going to be able to afford it, but I was asking about it. And it had to do with, they went into the mill, and the mill was being destroyed, but they went into the office, and there was a Napoleon Lajoie bat. It was hung up right behind the desk. And he said, what's that all about? And he said, the family says that bat was presented to him, the owner of the mill, in thanks for things he had done by Napoleon himself.
That's awesome.
So, but I mean, I don't know if there is a game used bat, because even that bat I think was probably a store-bought bat. Sure. It's still incredibly rare. And I have these decal bats that are beautiful, Jess. You would love to see them, where they have the images on them. And there were only like 4 players who started. And again, it was Cobb, Cy Young, Lajoie, and a 4th person that had their images in decal on the bat. And the decals are beautiful. And so they're the bats. So you can find this stuff. I have his pipe.
Really?
Yeah. And whenever I think, and as I'm getting older and looking more and more like the 84-year-old in the picture that guy gave me, it's, I'll pretend, and it's funny because I got it from the niece, okay, where he stayed. And I don't know about you, I would say I would never give this stuff away. I mean,
for
family.
Sure. Yeah. Because he never had any kids, right?
No. His nephew once was quoted as saying that his uncle called him over and said, come over to the house. I got a lot of stuff here. And he said, trophies, awards, bats, gloves, all his. And he said, but I was moving. I didn't have any room for any of it. So they threw it out.
You've got to be kidding.
But the pipe was funny because the woman wrote this nice article. She said, if anybody could ever be there to hear all the stories that kind of gathered in the smoke as this pipe came on to being. And he had a stream of people that were visiting all the time because he loved staying in touch with all his old friends.
Sure.
And so they would come, and since he was so easy to get along with, there were no fights. It was going to be a nice, simple time and fun time. And so I have it and pretend that, then I put on the total look, put on the Cleveland uniform, which is not the real thing. So, God, if it was. And unfortunately, with the kids, when I'm doing these presentations, I can't bring out the pipe. That's not too good.
No, that's probably not a good idea.
I do tell them the story that the old baseball cards.
Sure.
You get the players, but they were put inside tobacco. And Cy Young says, he said when Lajoie got his card on, he said the story was that there were thousands and thousands of kids all across the country that were sick because they all decided to chew the tobacco and they got the card,
The card.
hoping to get the card. So, but that goes to your point. We're talking about a national fame, not
Sure.
just one that is a local guy. And I don't know why did he go downhill? Well, I think not by downhill. Why is he not up there with the others? I think it's because of the dynamism of Ty Cobb. Let's face it, Ty Cobb, he won he bet 367 for his average, won
Sure.
6 consecutive batting titles, and had the American public in his mind, and they were fascinated. Everything he did, some of which was extremely bigoted and by no means worthy of emulation. Whereas with Lajoie, because I had to remember you're doing these presentations, you're saying, keep on looking because you don't want to find something where later on someone's going to say, and this is the guy that you gave all those presentations about, So I always do like a moral check on him. But I think because of him, and then came Babe Ruth.
Right.
Put that together with he's a graceful player, and not realizing that what's the poetry of baseball? It's that beautiful action of the field and the swing that is graceful, not in an aesthetic way like Fred, like I said, Fred Astaire, but in a real way of the beauty of baseball. Now I'd love to see Willie Mays. I'd love to see him run. See those. You see Jackie Robinson. That wasn't what Lajoie was, but the purity of what he did, And I'm going to get you that quote. I'll get you that video.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I've seen some of those old. That they had that old TV show, the Home Run Derby.
Yeah.
So you can watch Willie Mays against Hank Aaron head to head in this Home Run Derby TV show, which is amazing.
I know.
But yeah, no, that's amazing. I did want to ask. I have to ask before we go about the 1910 batting race.
Yeah,
it seems just about the craziest batting contest I've ever heard of in my life.
He was bitter to the end about this because and people didn't know that because it was only when later on afterwards that his nephew, there was a man named Lionel Lajoie, lived in Woonsocket, and so he had some stories about his uncle reacted to things, and he said he thought he got cheated out of the whole thing. I suppose for your audience sake, it was the automobile race, as you said, of 1910, and because all the other teams are out of it, it became the Cleveland was out of it, Detroit was out of it. I don't even know who was in first place at that point, but 10, 15 game lead.
Sure.
So everything fascinated on this race because the Chalmers Automobile Company was going to give one of their cars to the winner. And you hear conflicting reports whether they gave only one to the major leagues or whether they gave one for the American League and for the National League, Sure. But anyway, as one researcher said, America's fascination with the automobile was just starting to really grow. And for even nowadays, a player wouldn't even say, it's only a car. I don't care whether it's a Mercedes or whatever. I don't need it. But this was it. So there was a bitter battle. And it ended up being Cobb won. And he won by less than a half a point by most people, like somewhere in the 383, 384 zone. He stopped playing the last 2 games because he was convinced that he had a big enough lead. Because back then, official scorers, it varied according to what team, according to what syndicate had the information, and the
Sure.
American League would finally come out with it all. So he quit. Now, when you think of how Ted Williams went to bat, risking his 400 average.
Right, with the 406 day, absolutely.
Yeah. So on that, and some say Cobb just because he was seen even like partying and such,
Oh, jeez.
He would say it was his eye problems. The thing that became interesting was that, and you know this, is that in the last game, Lajoie played a doubleheader against the St. Louis Browns. He got 8 hits in the game, a single, a triple, and 6 bunt singles. Everybody went crazy saying, I smell something rotten. How can there be 6 bunt hits?
Yeah.
And the league investigated it, and they ended up suspending the manager, not the third baseman who played back. Some people said, of course they're going to play back. Look at the line drives that we were talking about that go down to the hot corner when Lajoie's at bat. Everyone was instructed, step back at least 1, maybe 2.
Sure.
And Lajoie himself said there was an opportunity there, so why not take it? It's
Sure,
a hit. So he ended up with those coming very, very close, within a half a point. And at times they thought he won. And because Ty Cobb was so hated by even his own teammates, his teammates sent a congratulatory telegraph to Napoleon saying, thanks for beating him, that kind of stuff. And there was no doubt that as, popular figure as Napoleon, Ty was too. He had his own welcoming group. But later on, Sporting News did a complete report on it. And they found out the winner should have been Napoleon, that he should have won because I think Ty Cobb had gotten credit twice for 2 hits. But there it is. And there's the good old fashioned moguls up on top. Well, we don't want to change baseball history. So, so even though there should be an asterisk next to that season, and we know they didn't want to stop because he was on the way for his 6th consecutive, this was not a 6th.
Oh, sure. Right.
So that they wanted to keep him in the limelight and all that kind of stuff. So the automobile, Chalmers ended up giving automobiles to both of them at the end, which is kind of nice. But again, it didn't satisfy Lajoie. He was, the other day he died, really annoyed about that. I don't blame him.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, so I did. First of all, I looked up that automobile. It's pretty cool. I guess the Rockefellers had one.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's had one. So very fun.
You notice when you see them in pictures, you'll see both Lajoie and Cobb in the car. Before it was because the company wanted pictures of them enjoying the car, even before they gave it to anybody, they'd always sit in the back seat because they didn't want to jinx it and go behind the wheel. They thought that would that'd be a jinx victory. They might end up, bad luck to do that.
Yeah, right.
So there are all kinds of stories within stories with these guys.
That's awesome. No, because one thing I forget where I read, one of the places that originally, because he was kind of, again, he was not happy with how that ended in that decision. So originally he did not want the car, but his wife was like, "We are taking the car," kind of situation.
I think so. I think it was one of those things where, at best, he took it reluctantly under some pressures from family, and they really, I didn't always find out which family member was pushing it, and on the other hand, he was a very frugal guy. So I think, he would always say, "I'm out for the stuff, the money," So, he didn't lie,
Sure.
So I think he probably said, "Well, I'm not an idiot either." There it is. Did he smile when he saw it? No, he probably gritted his teeth, but it was at least some form of satisfaction for him, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, no, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I could go on and on about his batting prowess,
Sure.
First guy to be, not the first guy, it was one of only 4 players, maybe they're 5 now with Hamilton and some others, to be walked with the bases loaded.
Intentionally walked, right?
And he was intentionally walked with 3 of the next 4 hitters that followed him would eventually become American Home Run League.
That's awesome.
Now, his greatest home runs only had 14. So
Right.
we're not talking about 71 for his whole career. It's not like anybody in big time now. But it said he was so hard to pitch to that a lot of funny stories have come up. Like, he was noted, and in fact, supposedly that pitcher that gave him, that recommended him, New Bedford team.
Sure.
Supposedly he said he hit a one-handed home run off me. And Lajoie didn't like the guy. He said, we looked at each other, and he didn't like the clothes I wore, and I didn't really like the clothes he wore. So there was a little class warfare going on between the Brown University student and such.
Okay, yeah.
But from that point on, it was always about he could hit anything, anywhere. So he would come to bat, and the first thing he would do, he had like maybe 2 or 3 bats in his hand. He'd push one, he'd take 2 out and hold his 1 bat, and then walk in. But then he would draw a line, right in the front of the batter's box. And it was his way of saying, now you're pitching to me. That's what this is all about,
Wow.
And they said that at times people would try to actually bean him, but he only got beaned once in his whole life. And again, it was attributed to he had amazing reflexes, So he even said that this Brown pitcher tried to bean me, but I stepped back and hit a home run. So he wouldn't crouch, and take position. He would walk up, and according to some sportscasters, they all kind of give different views. But one said he'd walk up, he wouldn't crouch, he'd have the bat by his side. When the pitcher went into his windup, he would then bring the bat up fast and do the swing, and still have that wonderful, sweet swing. I don't know how he did it.
How intimidating would that be if you're on the mound?
So there's one time where a guy said, I was trying not to pitch to him. He said, so I threw 2 pitches outside, and one time he hits it one-handed for a double, and another time, of course, I think then, Jess, you could step on the plate then.
Oh, okay.
And of course the plate was square until like 1900, so I don't know whether that made it easier or harder to step on, but it was there to be stepped on. So he could reach across more. So he did that, and it seems like the pitcher then said, I don't know, I'm going to try this. And he threw it at his ass and hit him in the butt. Yep. And then he yells out, even Lajoie can't hit a ball from his. So
very strong.
They had nice camaraderie. They kind of, it was fun times. But the old we are rough and ready. They played real hard, spikes. And as you said, he could be tough. He could be. Nobody wanted to be known as someone who didn't play the game hard, or didn't play it with a little intimidation.
No.
But they always would say, even the umps would say, always treated us fairly. Yeah, we had a few battles. He spit on me, but the umps would do it. I mean, when Eddie Collins was batting, he got in and the ump spits in his face, and Eddie Collins says, "Why'd you do that?" And the ump says, "I hate college kids."
Jeez.
So the umps were characters themselves.
Sure. Now, Napoleon kind of ended his major league career backing up Eddie Collins, if I remember right.
Yeah, right. He was part of that team that unfortunately really didn't do much, and he had one of his worst games with them. He made 5 errors in one game.
Oh, geez. That's a bad game. Yeah.
And it's funny because they said that's where he kind of he put himself at the end of the bench, and they said Connie Mack didn't have the nerve to say anything to him, but it was like, that's where you belong. You should be ashamed of yourself. And he was.
For sure.
And then he played in Toronto. He not played. Well, he did play a little bit too.
Yeah.
But he finished up in Toronto, which is kind of amazing. Won his first pennant, as you know, right there.
With the Maple Leafs, right? Isn't it? I think is awesome.
You're right. Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't play for the Toronto hockey team too. He had the build. He would have been a good defenseman.
Big dude. Yeah. No, that is awesome. I do want to get some quotes in here before we go, though, for sure. Because I think it's really interesting. I mean, we got a Cy Young quote talking about Lajoie was one of the most rugged players I ever faced. He'd take your leg off with a line drive, turn the third baseman around like a swinging door, and the hand of the left fielder. So, very fun quote. Christy Mathewson said that no one greater has ever played the game. Babe Ruth called him the greatest hitter of them all. His rival, Ty Cobb, we talked about a bunch, said, I'll save my praise for only the best. So you can take your Ruth, your hot dogs, and your homers, but give me Napoleon Lajoie. I mean, when you
those are I kind of, as you know, I wanted to put those in the front of the book because that was kind of like, you really don't want to see like a hometowner, even though I'm not born from Woonsocket. but you need to know that what the peers thought, when they've been relieved of having to say the standard answer,
Sure.
I mean, what will people say about A-Rod now versus what they say when he played or whatever,
Right. No, of course.
But the breadth of all that, that so many people could respect him in that kind of way. And I don't think he had, he had some enemies. I mean, there were some players on some teams that he didn't get along with his own team. And it was hard being a manager because, he couldn't take losing, and some of them didn't give the whole game. And
Sure.
other times, he got in trouble with the catch because he wouldn't get the catch a day off to get married. So they got into a battle, so I mean, the game is the game, as they kind of say, So,
Yeah,
but those
absolutely.
good folks, yeah, that's important to hear those things.
Yeah, I mean, not bad when you getting giant praise from Cy Young, Christy Mathewson, Babe Ruth. It's like, that's a pretty good group. And I did want to maybe even
the hardest thing with that was that many people thought that it was the day of science in baseball. So that, Ty Cobb was noted for being a scientific hitter, kind of consider like Ted Williams, where
right.
every part was broken down to the science. He wasn't that way at all. He just basically said, I see the ball, I hit it. I don't worry about watching the pitchers when they're warming up or what they have or what they bring. He said, once you've eaten food, your mouth doesn't have to worry about what to do. It just chews. And so he became known as a natural hitter. And that was a little bit of a, later on that became a great thing. But during his time, it was a mixed bag because everything is about science and progress and applying science. There are people who thought we were going to win World War I because baseball was bringing its science to the war. So it was kind of really bizarre stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that is, I mean, because I did see a scouting report talking about how he was like a terrific bunter, but he would swing at absolutely anything. Yeah, no, he was. Yeah,
they say it was very rare for him to swing on the first pitch. That normally he could take 2 strikes. He was kind of like Casey at the bat, like the 2 strikes, but instead of all the furor and calming the audience down and then striking out, he would belt that pitch, unerring eye, in that kind of way, and knew what he was doing. So
it was, the way it was described reminded me, I mean, the players I got to see, of almost like a Vladimir Guerrero, where anybody else in the world, you're saying to yourself, why are you possibly swinging at something chest high, or why are you possibly swinging at something that's almost at your feet? But then he would, it would be a rope.
Exactly. You're going to criticize success,
Right.
So he liked Lajoie would talk about, he loved Stan Musial. He would say Stan plays the game the way it's supposed to play. And, Musial was a lefty as opposed to Lajoie and all that kind of stuff as far as hitting. But he liked his style. He liked his swing. He liked his demeanor. He liked his sportsmanship. He wanted the complete package, and that was it. So as volatile as he could be, most of the time he was really a paragon of control. With the umpires, everybody got out of control with them at times. That was expected,
It sounds pretty wild, that player-umpire relationship.
Yeah, and God knows what really happens when the clubhouse doors close now, and what's said to whom and what injuries occur. The thing I would kind of like to somehow figure out is I'd like the audience to just kind of know that what we're doing now, we as this unearthing our hero, Napoleon Lajoie task force.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it's got, like we said, it's got Little League president. We have the educational superintendent we have the Museum of Working Culture. We have Paul Sox used to be on it, obviously not now.
All right.
And we have city councilmen. We have the mayor and such. So the idea is that we want to keep, and it's been hurt by the pandemic, because the momentum just kind of came to a stop,
Sure.
But the first thing was to educate kids at especially younger levels, and provide them with books, but also do an intergenerational thing, where the other book, which is the, more for the adults, a parent can read that, or an adult can, and share stories and go back and forth, between the simplicity of the children's book and that. And then continue, find some money to go to Cooperstown, because even though they're inviting us, they're not paying.
Yeah, you got to get there, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So we got to get on the bus. We got to go one or two nights at the hotel and that kind of stuff. And then the statue. I would be resting easy if I could say those three things are in place. So anyone who kind of says, I'd like to help you or tell me more about it, or I know this possibility of how you might do this, because I just don't want to go on GoFundMe. I might, eventually.
Sure.
You never know what people will support. These are very worthwhile, but I'm not a fundraiser. I'm basically just keep on reading baseball books. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no mansion in the background that.
No, I'm not missing out.
Sorry about that, but that'd be good. And they could either reach me at my email, which is grujake@verizon.net, grujake@verizon.net, or they can do the Facebook Gregory Rubano author, and then get on there and such, and they can buy the books, on Amazon and River Press. So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. This has been way fun, Greg. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. God bless.
You got it. You have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.